Hello, my name's Scott Farber, and I'm the president and founder of A-List Education. And welcome to a webinar about the college essay, how to make an application stand out. I'm going to be walking you through over the next hour some ideas that can improve your college essay, some things to do and some things to watch out for. Because the college application and the essays in particular are the natural continuation of you presenting yourself to a university or a college as you move on from high school. And to make sure that you're able to tell your story in the best way possible, it's essential that when you pour your life into your own words and create your personal statement, you do it in a way that really frames who you are, how you think, and where you're going. To get started, I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of my background and why it is that I think that I've got something to share, some ideas and some experience to offer that hopefully will offer you some insight into how you can shape your essay. I applied to college without much of a plan. To tell you the truth, when I was in high school, I really didn't love high school. In fact, I kind of majored in field trips. If there was a reason to be outside of school, I definitely found it. But that meant that I was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. I was president of student government, I was editor-in-chief of the newspaper. I actually wound up working for the House of Representatives when I was in high school, and I wound up being the student representative to the school board. All of those activities were meaningful to me, not for a resume to apply to college, but because I really enjoyed them. Little did I know that they would actually be instrumental in helping me tell the story I needed to tell when I began to apply. Now, I did well in high school. I had a pretty good GPA, I had pretty well on my SATs. But one of the things that was really of top concern as I was applying to school was, how am I going to not only get in, but pay for this? One of the things that happens when you're struggling financially is you start looking at college not just as an opportunity to improve your life and give you good job prospects when you get out, but also to make sure 100% you've got the opportunity to not graduate owing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And with my family unable to contribute very much at the time, I was looking for great scholarships. Now, I really wanted to go to Penn State because I was living in Pennsylvania at the time, and that seemed like a really great option. But my mother sat me down and she said, listen, Penn State is a great school, but you don't know where you're going to get in until you apply. So you're going to sit down and you're going to fill out a dozen applications, and we're going to send them off whether you think you're going to get in or you don't. We're going to apply. It was fantastic advice. You know, when you're in high school, you don't really believe that your parents know much. And there's a great quote from Mark Twain saying, I left home at 18 thinking my parents were the stupidest people I'd ever met. Returned home in 7 years, surprised at how much they had learned. I got to tell you, it's pretty true. I definitely did not want to write another essay. I definitely did not want to apply to another school. But looking back, my mom pushing me to apply, best advice I ever got. Now, I applied to Georgetown, and I got in and got a really great scholarship. It's an amazing university. I wanted to study international relations. But my mom said, that's great, but we've got more on the list. I applied to Duke. I got in. They actually offered me more money than Georgetown. And I applied to Harvard, and I wound up getting in and getting nearly a full ride. I only paid a couple of $1,000s to go to college. Now, I had no inclination and no belief that I could possibly get into a place like Harvard University. But once I got in, I arrived and talked to my admissions officer, and he gave me some pretty good insight into how an opportunity like that could be presented to somebody like me. I didn't have any legacy. I wasn't a fourth generation. I didn't come out of a private school. I went to public school. But what he said is that when Harvard looks at applicants, they're not just interested in the numbers that show up on a piece of paper. And for those of you that are sitting in your junior year, maybe just taking the SAT or about to take the SAT in May, maybe you're taking an ACT in April, it's easy to get caught up just in test scores. But it's really important that you understand that to the most competitive schools in this country, you are more than just a number on a piece of paper. What he explained to me was that the year I applied to school, 2/3 of the kids with perfect scores got rejected. Perfect SAT scores, rejected. I did not have perfect SAT scores, and I got in. So it's important that you realize the rest of who you are has to shine through in an application. It's not enough to just seem like you're a great applicant on paper with your numbers and your GPA, but you also need to be able to tell a compelling story. You need to be able to present a powerful portrait. You need to be able to convince a university that you're going to contribute on campus and that your mind is going to be of value not just to the 4 years of the university you spend there, but moving beyond their doors after you graduate. So as I take a look at the college essay, I think about it from a very personal perspective, that what I wrote about and how I framed my position in life and where I wanted to go played a role in getting me in. Often people try and think about the resume as being the key determinant after you take a look at SAT scores and ACT scores and GPA. But one of the things that you guys should remember is that there are 30,000 high schools in this country, which means there are 30,000 presidents of student government, 30,000 editors of the newspaper, about 10 high school sports teams per school, 300,000 captains of teams. That means that there are a lot of people that have those things on a resume, those check boxes that they can submit. How you wrap that up into a compelling story, that's your personal statement. Now, when I went to school, I got a degree in international relations. I was pretty convinced I was going to become an ambassador. Turns out at 22, nobody gives you that job. I was very disappointed, so I moved to South America. In moving to South America, I had an amazing opportunity firsthand to build a project that was really at its core about education. I had never thought about going into education, mostly because my parents were in education, and you never want to be like your parents. But the project that we built, my best friend and I, on the coast of Ecuador, wound up coming in ahead of schedule and under budget, and it was built to be sustainable. That's really where I started to think about, for me, a career opportunity might be in education, because it was about more than just what happens in the four walls of a classroom. It's beyond that. And that to me became an opportunity, I think, to change my career trajectory. I spent the next 6 months after running that project wandering around South America with a machete. Wandered through Bolivia, Peru, Argentina, Chile, Brazil. I climbed the Andes. I wandered through the Amazon. And all of that led me back to New York with an opportunity to get involved in education. I didn't really know where to get started, but I went to work for a company that specialized in helping students move from high school to college, focusing mainly on test preparation. And after a couple of years, I felt that what I had done there, I could do bigger and better on my own. So I went to my boss and I said, listen, I'd like to go build a company that is going to work more directly with schools, that's going to work more individually with students beyond test scores, that's going to really care about education in a meaningful way. And it wasn't the company that he wanted. So in 2005 rather, I left and I took his 4 best employees with me and I set up A-List Education. We started with about 5 students. Last year, we served 24,000 students in some capacity with our products and services spread across about 20 states, and now internationally in China, in Switzerland, in London. We've got students that come from Italy, from Norway, from Spain. What I'm here to tell you is that I've got a vast array of experience, not just in helping students, when we think about it, do well on a test or enhance their reading skills or build their math skills, but in the whole process. Because the process to me is not so much about your application, but what doors that application is going to open for you. I've personally worked with about 4,000 students, and that's kind of an insanely large number for somebody who's only 35 years old. But that gives you a sense of just how tirelessly I work at this job. I work 7 days a week. We've got a staff of 100, and we do everything from work directly with schools to improve curriculum, to do one-on-one tutoring after school for students that need intense remediation. We work with very big schools and very small schools. We work with charter schools. We work with nonprofits. 80% of our students actually don't even pay a single dollar for what we do, because leveling the playing field is really important to me. The reason I'm here today, and the reason I want to take the next 45 minutes to an hour with you, is to help give you some of the insight that I've got based on that experience. I've spent 12,000 hours in the classroom teaching things to help students move on to the next level. And ultimately, the personal statement is a way for you to capture all of your hopes and dreams and distill them into 650 words, and is your best chance to help you sell yourself to a whole bunch of universities that are looking at more applicants than they have ever seen before. When we think about the competition today, it's daunting. 3.5 million kids will move from high school into some sort of higher education at the end of this year. The same thing last year, and we're looking at more kids coming from overseas. We're looking at really large numbers. That's not meant to scare you, but that's meant to let you know that honestly, the playing field is crowded. And to make yourself stand out, you're going to need a strong personal statement. So, now that I've spent a little time introducing myself, because I want you to know who I am and why I've got something to share with you, I want to point you in the direction of the opportunity to write questions as I'm presenting. Because as much as I think the stuff I have to offer is valuable, I'm also here to answer your questions and be responsive to you. So feel free to shoot questions whenever you want. Just because I don't address them right away doesn't mean that I don't care about you. I do care. But it just means that I might get to it at somewhat later in my presentation, so I don't want to take the sidestep now to respond to everything. For those of you who ask questions that I don't get to, I'm going to put my email address up at the end so that you'll be able to email me directly after this. And I'd just like to thank all of you for tuning in, because I think that if you've taken the time, set aside time in your day to really care about the college essay right now, that means you're already steps ahead of many of your peers. Great job. Now let's see what we can do to help. So how do you get started? Most students apply, or most students attempt the college essay from the wrong direction. They try and pick a really great theme first, like my life is a big red shoe, or some equally stupid plan, where you try and force your life into this really awkward theme because you're trying to be creative. That's the wrong way to do this. What you really want to do is you really want to start by kind of interviewing yourself. Now, this can be done with a teacher or a tutor or a guidance counselor or a friend or a parent, anybody. Just sit down and start discussing what makes you, you. When I say the interview, what I really mean is focus on all the different stories that you could possibly tell. And then what we'll do is we'll try and tie them together into some clear picture at the end. So for instance, I break out categories like adversity. Let's start there. When we're talking about adversity, many students struggle to come up with a really great story that they feel is valuable enough to share with the college. They say things like, oh, I wish I had some really hard luck life and I had to struggle to get through school and I lived in a really bad neighborhood. Listen, first of all, you don't wish that. So let's not pretend that's really what you're wishing. Second of all, you've had moments of adversity. Some of us have struggled for really, really painful things in life. Some of us have lost people that we've cared about. Some of us have struggled to succeed in school. Some of us have faced disease and death and so much more. But there are also little moments in life that are really telling tales of moments of adversity that you might have experienced that don't have to rise to this epic level of some huge battle, you against the world. It could be something like you broke your arm and it was actually really difficult to write. It could be that you moved to a new place. One of the things that my admissions officer said to me that really impressed him is that I highlighted that moving from one place to another put me on a somewhat weaker footing than all the other students who knew each other. But I wasn't going to let that set me back, and I was going to strive to actually interact with everybody and involve myself in more activities. Adversity is a broad category. But when I say interview, what I really mean is write down any moment that you've ever had to struggle, any moment where things haven't gone right, and set that on one page. By doing that, we're going to start to give ourselves a basis to pull stories that actually have meaningful connections. For instance, one of the students that I was working with was trying to come up with a moment of adversity, and he comes from a very comfortable life in a nice suburban town, and he said he didn't really have any moments of adversity. I said, I find that hard to believe. Everybody's got a moment of adversity. And you know what he realized? He realized that at one point they were, his soccer team that he was participating in had gotten to the quarterfinals. Not the finals, not the state championship, quarterfinals. It had gone to penalty kicks and he had volunteered to take one of the kicks. He actually booted the ball about 15 feet over the goalposts. Now, the team lost. He felt it was entirely his fault and he was devastated. Well, by the way, that's a moment of adversity. Now, it may not be as traumatic as some others, but it was for him a traumatic moment. We wound up telling his entire story within the 30 seconds before he took that shot. We wound up talking about what brought him to be taking that shot. We talked about all of the years he had spent on the field preparing for that moment. We talked about how all of the stuff he had been doing on the field also applied off the field in school. And then when he took that shot, you expected, you half really were rooting for him, to of course win the game. But the twist was that he missed terribly and they lost the game. That moment of adversity could have left him frustrated. He could have walked off the field, head held low, crying hysterically. But instead, he decided that, you know what, I'm going to learn from this. He spent the summer training even harder. He wound up taking the team to the state championship the next year, and they lost anyway. But in those moments of growth, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, that's something that can really resonate with a college admissions, somebody in the admissions office. Another student talked about taking a trip overseas and not being able to speak the language. That could be a moment of adversity. So when we do this interview, think of topics like adversity, diversity. Diversity is another great topic for an interview. Moments where you've been different. Oftentimes students point out, I'm not the diverse one. I don't come from Bangladeshi and South African parents. I don't speak 4 languages at home. Diversity means a lot of different things. Diversity could really be as simple as you have an accent that no one else has. It could be that you look a little different than someone else. It could be you think a little different. It could be that you're the only Republican in a liberal high school. It could be you're the only liberal in a conservative high school. You can start to set yourself apart simply by highlighting that you're not like everybody else. And the diversity essay will work for a lot of different opportunities, and we can tie it together to many things. Let's go back to the idea of the adversity of going to another country and not speaking the language. It's not just struggling to overcome something there, but it's also highlighting the ability to deal with difference. Adversity and diversity interact pretty frequently. Beyond adversity and diversity, other parts of the interview that you should probably touch on. Now, and again, when I say interview, don't limit yourself. Go off on tangents. Write in all directions. Tell every story that comes to mind. Write everything down that you can. Beyond adversity and diversity, I ask students to come up with extracurricular activities that they're involved in. I ask them to tell me what they do over the summer. I ask them to tell me about moments of travel. I want to know about their jobs. I want to know about everything that they've done over their lives that in any way is meaningful. That's the point of the interview. That's the first step. As you start to put those ideas on paper, what you're going to recognize is that there are common threads. The adversity story intersects with the diversity story, which incidentally, the reason that she was overseas in China and not speaking Chinese and now dealing with elements of different cultures was because she was in the Model UN Club. It now ties back to extracurricular activities. When you start to think about how these different pieces tie together, that's when you start to have a really compelling essay. It's not simply about telling one story. It's about telling several stories that intersect into one theme. That gives your essay texture. That makes your essay stand out. And that's going to be something that really sets you apart from everybody else. The next part of the process that you want to be thinking about is what we call drafting and revising. When I say drafting and revising, that means take all of the different ideas that you have written down, that you have brainstormed to try and tie them together, and begin to write your essay. One of the big mistakes that students make is that you assume that you're supposed to just write an essay, hit spell check, and be done. That's not good writing. Now, I know that might work in a history class where you're rushing to get a paper in Thursday night before it's due Friday first thing in the morning. I get that. I was also in high school too. I also procrastinated. But this is your college essay. This isn't some assignment you're rushing to get in at the end of the week. This is your chance to proclaim to a college how you're different. You need to take time. And when I say you need to take time, that means that you need to draft not just once, twice, 3 times, but this is an iterative process. For those of you, by the way, who don't know what iterative is, I hope you're not taking the SAT because you should know what that word means. It means a repetitive process. It's something that's going to have many iterations. What you want to think about is drafting an essay, coming up with the best paragraph, the best 2 paragraphs, and throwing everything else out. Build around that. Keep the next best paragraph. Throw everything else out. What you want to do is constantly refine so that you're left with only the best of the best of the best. And that's how you get to your final draft. So as we think about the process, what you're thinking first is an interview. Don't think of your essay topic. Don't try and come up with your theme. Go in all directions. Evaluate those directions and start to see which ones fit together. And that's brainstorming. That says, great, I've got 4 or 5 stories here that I'm going to have to flesh out. I can't just say the Thanksgiving dinner from 3rd grade where Uncle Harry said that crazy thing. You're going to have to tell me the story. Then we're going to try and tie those pieces together in a series of drafts. We're going to edit, we're going to revise, and then we're going to be left with the final draft. Now, how do we start picking our topics? How do we actually use the interview? When we talk about using the interview and going in multiple directions, I want to highlight that there is no right or wrong topic. I've come across some amazing essays that really, in my mind, would have never, in my mind, occurred to me to actually take it as a direction. Oftentimes, you guys think that you have to come up with the most special story in the world. You hear me talk about South America. I told you that part of my life story to highlight that it was an integral part of who I became. The idea, however, wasn't that South America was my story. Education was my story. But think about how I presented that introduction. That introduction gave you a reason to believe that what I had to offer had value. But I couldn't just tell you that I had a lot of experience. I had to make you understand me as a person. I had to put me back in your shoes in high school. I had to apply to a college. I had to learn something there. I had to move somewhere else. I had to come to this moment where I understood who I wanted to be. And then, you know what? I had to go to a business and struggle to do the thing I wanted, and then ultimately could start doing something different. In thinking about those sequences, I tied together not just that I moved to a new place, not just that I had to apply to college, not just that I went to college, not just that I moved to South America, not just that I had a job, and not just that I actually wound up starting my own company. But there was a constant theme in the background of helping somebody achieve at the next level. If you brainstorm multiple moments in your life, multiple stories that connect, insofar as those topics are going to be of interest to the reader, you're going to do the magnificent job of connecting the dots for the reader. Here's a great story that I heard. At the University of Arizona, a professor wanted to study the irrational behavior of students. We all want better grades. We all want to get into a better school. We all want a great essay. The problem is we don't always act in our best interest because we don't know how to connect the dots. So here's what he did. He said, anybody that shows up at any point during my office hours for the entire semester, I will raise your grade a third of a letter. So if you have a B, I'll give you a B plus. You get a B plus, I'll give you an A minus. All you have to do is show up. You don't have to have any questions. You don't need to turn any work. You just have to come and sign my book. Only 10% of the students actually showed up. I would be willing to bet that if you asked every student in that room when he made that announcement, do you want higher grades? All the students would have said yes. And yet only 10% took the step of actually showing up. The next semester, he gave them a map, and he had them circle where his office was on the map. Still, only 25% of the class actually came. The next semester, he gave out a map. He had them circle where his office was, where they lived, draw a line in between, and list a date and a time they were going to show up. 85% of the class actually came. Think about that as a metaphor for how to get to a good essay. I know you want a good essay. I know you want a good application, but you can't simply want it. You're going to have to connect the dots. You're going to have to take these steps. But in understanding that this is a process, and in understanding that in connecting the dots, you'll get the great essay, take my advice, begin now. Why do you need to take so much effort, and why do you need to invest so much in this essay? Because of the value it has for the application. There's a great quote, I believe it was Dean Fitzsimmons at Harvard who wrote it. A good essay can heal the sick, but can't raise the dead. The essay, what he's saying there, can play a major role in overcoming things like perhaps a less than perfect transcript, perhaps slightly worse critical reading scores than you would have liked. The essay can go some way towards convincing a college that you have what it takes to get there, and that once you're on campus, they're going to like you. They're going to want you to stay. That's really the goal of the essay. However, it can't raise the dead. So I need to be honest here, full disclosure. If you write the best essay on the planet, but you have 300s on your reading and 300s on your math, you are not going to Yale. It is not going to happen. I love telling students about the grand plans, and I want them to have big ambition, but you have to be realistic. I'm not going to play second base for the Yankees. I'm just not. Even if I really, 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 really want to play second base for the Yankees. I have students all the time. They're like, Scott, I really want to go to the University of Pennsylvania. Yeah, well, I really want a pony. I don't know what to tell you. It's not going to happen. You've got a 270 in math. So here's what you need to focus on. You need to focus on getting all aspects of your application in order. The essay can be hugely helpful, but you need to get them to read the essay. And if your SAT scores, your ACT scores, and your GPA don't make you at least interesting to them on a competitive basis, they're never going to get by that to look at your essay. If you're a junior, right now, you have plenty of time to do this. We work with thousands of kids across the country to help them raise their scores. We work with thousands of kids helping them improve their reading and study skills to help their GPA. We do all of that because, quite honestly, if you want to go to college, there's no easy way to make it happen. I can't just spend an hour with you and tell you how to write a good essay. It's not going to work. So you need to make sure all of these pieces fit together. So you want to present the right image because it does have tremendous value for your application. Hugely important. When I say presenting the right image, you want to try and avoid doing some things that would make them second guess whether or not you're going to be a risky addition to campus. For instance, some students want to tell me the stories about how they've just emerged from rehab. Now, I congratulate those students for facing down a serious problem. And I congratulate them for dealing with it in a realistic way and getting the help they need. But if you're applying to a college and you're 18 years old and you say that you have a rampant drug and alcohol problem that you're currently dealing with, that is not the image that you want to present. It's not that you're trying to purposely hide all sorts of difficult aspects of who you are, but if you were going to try and introduce yourself for the first time, that's not part of the first impression conversation. So when we're talking about things to avoid, let me just highlight a couple of others. Yes, you might have made mistakes in life. You might have screwed some things up. But if you've resorted to violence, now is not the time for you to share that in your personal statement. If you've been thrown out of school, the personal statement, most likely not the time for you to explain all of the terrible things you were doing at school. In fact, there's actually a separate part of the application that you will have to explain why you got thrown out of school. If you really hate people and you would prefer to be a hermit living on the top of a mountain, and you're going to only show up to class once in a while, that's not the impression that you would like to give in your personal statement. So, when we talk about things to avoid, what we don't want you to do is give the wrong first impression. Now, a bunch of you have been submitting questions, and actually a bunch of interesting international students. We do a lot of work with international students, so it's good to see you guys showing up. We'll kind of talk about some international topics as well. But let me just make one mention of something else about getting started. We talked about the interview, and we've talked about why it's important to go brainstorm in multiple directions. We've talked about how it's valuable to get your essay in great shape because it's going to push you over the edge for those students that are trying to create a great first impression. But we've also highlighted that it's not the only thing that you need to do. So you do need to make sure the rest of your application is in order. And we have highlighted that we do want to avoid trying to present something crazy that would lead some school to be a little bit worried about adding you to campus. Something else that you want to avoid is starting too late. Many of our students make the mistake of thinking that the personal statement can be written in a couple of days before an application is due. That is not a good plan. Juniors, you're sitting here right now thinking to yourself, maybe I'll write it at the end of the summer. Well, bottom line is you have all summer. There's no reason to wait till the end of the summer, especially because the brainstorming and the kind of germination process, the idea of helping this blossom, is going to take some time. I encourage you to begin thinking about this once you've gotten through whatever tests, finals, statewide exams, SATs, ACTs. I encourage you to start thinking about this at the end of your junior year. For those of you who are freshmen and sophomores who are thinking to yourself, well, do I really need this advice right now? The truth is you do. You don't need to be writing your actual personal statement to actually be writing down valuable stuff that you're experiencing right now. One of the things that I encourage all of my students to do if I begin with them in ninth grade is to take the time to create what you might call a journal. Now, I don't mean like third grade journal in the marble composition book where you're like, dear journal, I had a great day today. I really like taco day. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you were going to run for president of Key Club. It is a big deal. You've invested time in the club, you've spent time doing fundraisers, you're agonizing over your speech, you're nervous, your palms are sweaty, you make your speech, you sit down, you're so happy, you lose the election. There is no more powerful a moment for you to capture that than right after it happens. By the time you get to 11th grade, some of that has worn off. You guys have experiences every day of your life, many of which are incredibly valuable. So I encourage 9th graders and 10th graders and 11th graders to begin thinking about this early so that you don't rush to create something in a mad panic just before the deadlines. Now, in saying that about deadlines, it's also incredibly important for you to understand that you need to identify all of your essay requirements when you get started. Now, what do I mean by identifying all your essay requirements? Most students say things like, what do I do to write the essay? I don't know what you're talking about because there isn't just one essay. The Common App has a personal statement that will apply to many schools. That is certainly true. But the majority of competitive schools will ask for more than one essay. Many schools will ask for a huge number of additional essays. They will ask you why you want to apply to my school, why you want to apply to this particular program, tell me about what you did last summer, tell me about the extracurricular activity that means the most to you. There are a lot of different essay requirements. Students that are applying to a group of competitive schools might be facing as many as 17, 20, 35 additional essay requirements. Now, don't worry, by the way, at the end I will tell you how to make sure that you don't have to go nuts writing 35 essays. It's a program that we built. It's free for you to access to get started. But it's important that you identify all of your essay requirements at the very beginning. The idea of brainstorming in multiple directions helps you also begin to write the essays that will be required beyond the personal statement. If you think about the process here, let's say we have 5 stories, of which 3 fit together really neatly, but the other 2 are also super important. Well, what should you do? Well, run those 3 together in your personal statement and save the other 2 for your additional essays. If you've identified all your essay requirements at the beginning and you've brainstormed effectively, you don't have to go through this process on a constant basis. You can actually wind up taking tremendous advantage of the pre-planning to get started. So when you're thinking about identifying all the essay requirements, it's so that you can have a good plan with all of your writing to write the least amount of crazy, terrible stuff and the most relevant and powerful and meaningful stuff. Now, I'm going to pause for a second because a couple of questions have been coming in. One, how do I write a good essay? That's not an easy question to answer, and hopefully some of the stuff that we'll be talking about over the course of the day will be useful. We have a lot of resources as well. You can certainly follow up with us. There's more than I can answer just in a single session. Another question is, what if you aren't in any clubs and you're worried about how would you know what to put in your personal statement? That's an excellent question. And one of the things that I want to highlight is when I refer to things like clubs and extracurricular activities, lots of times students misunderstand what I'm really saying. I'm really talking about anything that you do after school. Now, some of them are clubs for school. But like I said, there are going to be 30,000 presidents of Key Club and 30,000 presidents of the Model UN Club. And by the way, it is not to diminish those of you who might be listening who might be president of the Model UN Club or who might be president of the Key Club. But it's to highlight that not everybody needs to tell a story from a club. One of my students wrote probably the best essay that I can remember in her class about 4 years ago. Not about a club, but actually about a summer internship. Never mentioned a club at all. Summer internships can be incredibly powerful and meaningful windows into who you are because they can tell what it's like when you've stepped outside of your comfort zone of school and friends. When you think about it, an internship is a really powerful way to show a college, number one, you've got an interest in a particular topic. She wanted to study medicine. She wound up getting an internship at a hospital where she got to follow around doctors. But two, not just that she was interested, she went the extra mile. She didn't just say, I want to study pre-med, let me into your school, Harvard, because I really want to go there. Listen, take some steps. Prove to them that you can actually do something more productive than just demand entrance. Now, her essay was incredibly powerful because what she did is she framed the entire internship not in terms of how amazing it was to be involved in a hospital and learn the magic of medicine, but actually to learn about its limitations. What she wrote was about all of her enthusiasm showing up the first day, following the doctors around, feeling the hustle and bustle of an ER. But the entire essay was framed with one man who was wheeled in on a stretcher. And because we started with that image of him being wheeled in on a stretcher, and then she went into all of the things she was expecting to happen and all of the excitement and all of the good that doctors do, nobody saw it coming. The end of the story, that patient died. And she had to confront what it is to be a doctor, not just for saving lives, but what happens when you lose one. That was a depth in storytelling that went above and beyond what they were expecting. I know she got an early University of Michigan. It was her dream school. She did a beautiful job. And she wrote a compelling essay that was all about, hey, you know what? I took this extra step. I'm interested in this. But you know what? I'm no longer as naive as I used to be. That's a growing experience that colleges want to see. So just because you don't have any clubs doesn't mean that you don't have activities that you're involved in that can be incredibly valuable. It also doesn't have to even be something like an internship, by the way. It could be something more informal. Maybe you love running, but you hate the track team. The track coach is just an awful human being. You hate the kids that are on the track team. You don't like the competitive side. I had a student who wrote an amazing essay about running, despite the fact that she wasn't on the cross-country team or the track team. We wrote the entire essay around the concept of, here's what I think about when we run. Now, when I say we right here, part of what she needed was for me to draw this topic out. Because what she really wanted to write about was about a club she didn't care about. And the truth was is that wasn't going to make a very good essay. So when I say we, sometimes it's really important to talk to somebody about this. You don't have to do it all on your own. Now, quick word of advice. Don't let somebody write your essay for you. Don't let them offer so much editing it stops sounding like your voice. Be careful about taking advice. Advice is just that. It doesn't mean somebody else is doing the job for you. But oftentimes, a journey of self-exploration takes a guide. It takes some help. Reaching out and asking for help can be incredibly valuable. So, just flipping through some of the other questions. Let's see what we've got here. Great question. We've seen this now. Schools in South America, schools in China, schools in the UK. We actually work in all of these places. Very different than the essays that students are expected to write. When you apply to UK colleges, and we work with a lot of students in our London office. When you apply to UK colleges, your personal statement is very much a restatement of your CV, a restatement of your resume. It's basically, here are all the things that I've done. That's not really what a college admissions officer wants to hear here in the United States. What an admissions officer really wants to read is who you are. And trying to cram too much into the essay is going to lose your voice. It's going to come across like a list. What you're really looking to do is do your best to take a single moment or a single set of moments and use those as a window into who you are. So it could very well be that you're highlighting things on your resume. There's nothing wrong about that. But dive more deeply into the topic itself. Don't come up short where you're just going to be restating what's there. And let's talk about that concept. I have it here in the middle of the page. It's show, don't tell. When I say show, don't tell, one of the biggest mistakes that we wind up finding students do is they just want to tell us how amazing they are. I'm really great. Well, I'm sure you are. But that's not how this essay is supposed to go. You're not supposed to tell me that you're great. You're supposed to present a picture where I walk away from looking at that picture believing that you're great. Show me through your activities. Oftentimes, and I can't even tell you how many times I've read this, and I find it just insane, really. Students say things like, at 17, I finally figured out what I want in life. You know, here's the thing. At 17, you have no clue what you want in life. Ask your parents if they knew at 17. Ask me at 35. Ask your teachers at whatever ages they are if really you knew what you wanted when you were 17. There are, by the way, a handful of people, sure, that are exceptions. But the vast majority of us did not know what we wanted for the rest of our life at 17. So don't tell me that. Show me that there are some things you're interested in exploring. Show me that you're interested in opening doors. Don't tell me that you want to be a marine biologist. Show me that you love scuba diving and that you feel at home 500 feet below the ocean's surface in a shipwreck off the coast of the Florida Keys. Don't tell me that you want to be a banker. Show me that you go out of your way to provide an investment portfolio club at your school because it didn't exist before. Don't tell me, show me. Now, in order to do that, you have to appreciate the value of free writing. When I say the value of free writing, what I mean is don't try and write your essay to start. Write in all directions. Don't worry about your sentence structure. Don't agonize about perfection. There's a great phrase, don't let perfection become the enemy of the good. You're not going to perfect your essay first. Getting good ideas out, getting good phrases out. I've seen essays be built out of a single sentence. A really powerful sentence can become, honestly, the structure upon which you build the rest of your story. So indulge in free writing. Let me just give you a quick mental image. Think about that time you had to try and write an essay, and you pulled up Microsoft Word or you pulled up Pages, and it's a blank white screen. When you have that blank white screen, getting started is the hardest part. You know it. You try and come up with the perfect opening line. Do not try and do that here. Do not stare at the blank white page. Write. Write whatever comes to mind. Write in all directions. Make the grammar terrible. Sometimes just throw words at the page. You'd be surprised at what happens if you let the floodgates open. Amazing ideas can really start pouring out. And that leads me into connecting multiple threads. As I alluded to before, you don't know the direction of your essay yet. So it's really important that what you do is get a couple of ideas in a couple of different directions and then look for the theme that connects them all. Let me give you an example. One of my students really wanted to write about her sister who had struggled with a really terrible illness. And as tragic and as difficult as it was to know that her sister spent years battling this and in the end won and emerged on the other side a stronger young woman, that essay wouldn't have been about my student. That essay would have been about her sister. So I told her in no uncertain terms, I'm sorry, you can't write that essay. By the way, she was pretty upset with me. She was like, that's ridiculous. I get to write my essay. Listen, I know you guys want to do the things you want to do, but definitely get some advice here. You cannot write about somebody else. That's not the goal here. You can write about how you were impacted by somebody else, but the essay can't be about them. So I said, listen, since we're not going to write about your sister, why don't we write about all of the things that you remember about being with your sister in the hospital? Why don't we write about all of the things that your sister makes you think of now that you're older? Why don't we write about all of the things you want to do in life that are somehow inspired by your sister? Multiple threads here. What we wound up realizing is actually the clubs that she joined in school, almost without fail, were somehow related to raising money for illnesses or working with families that had somebody that was either stricken with the illness or was struggling because a family member had the illness. And she wanted to be a doctor. And it turned out that her volunteer activities were at the local hospital. Okay, multiple threads, now we had to tie them together. Now, how do we connect all of these? You don't want to just say, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. That's not very exciting. That's not what you want. So what we did is we told the entire story within an afternoon where she was sitting on a couch at the hospital reading Green Eggs and Ham to a little girl. A little girl who, incidentally, was just like her when she was at the age of 5, sitting at the hospital hoping her little sister would be better. We told the whole story, little by little, with flashbacks and flash forwards. But the anchor of the whole story was her with a little girl nestled in her arms, reading Green Eggs and Ham. And we interspersed the essay with little references to Green Eggs and Ham. That made the essay multiple threads all come together. Now, at first, she was, say, resistant to the idea of taking a look at multiple threads. But you know what we got when we finished that essay? The story of her sister. But not the story of her sister alone, the story of how her sister impacted her. Now, that made for a really great essay. That, by the way, is why you need to solicit different perspectives. If you just spend your time writing the things that you want to write, you may never find out that the idea that you had is actually not a very good one. I had a student really want to write about his anger management class that he had just finished. Do you think a college really wants a student who's just completed anger management classes? Can you imagine what kind of form you've got to fill out in picking a future roommate? Listen, I'm a really angry individual, and I have issues controlling that anger. Who wants to live with me? That is definitely not what you want. But the kid, understandably, was proud that he had gotten control of his anger, but he didn't realize he went in a bad direction until he asked me. So, I'm not saying that you always need to ask for everybody's opinion around you, but it's incredibly useful and it will make you more self-aware to appreciate other people's perspectives. Now, it's also important as you begin the drafting and revising after we've pulled together these different threads that you really think about this in terms of length. Somebody earlier in the session, let's see, it was one of the first or second questions. Yes, I see it up here. 500 words is not enough space to tell a lot of stories. It's very true. The thing is, we actually have more than 500 words, right? We actually do have more than 500 words for the personal statement. But it is important that you understand how length can impact your ability to tell stories. It might be that you can't tell all 5 of the stories you want in your personal statement because in 650 words, you just don't have the space. But that's what the other essay requirements are for. It's for you to be able to tell that other story. You can talk about that really meaningful club in another setting. It doesn't have to be in your personal statement, but it still tells a bit of who you are. It's important that you understand your length requirements because there's nothing more painful than writing 5,000 words of the greatest story ever told and then realizing that nobody wants to read your 5,000. Now, by the way, somebody might want to read your 5,000 words. An admissions officer doesn't want to read your 5,000 words. So it is important to understand length requirements. If you don't understand length requirements at the outset, you can wind up with a lot of difficulty in actually getting this whole thing to work. Okay. When we talk about drafting and revising, and we're talking about getting that personal statement in order, I hope that some of the ideas that I tossed out, actually, you know what? Let's backtrack for 1 second. Some of the ideas that I tossed out, I think you started to see how multiple threads connect. It could be about your internship meets your career. It could be about your activities meets your personal history meets your future career or what you want to study. There are lots of different ways to connect things. But there's also the element of the comedic essay. This, by the way, is incredibly difficult to pull off, but some really great writers can do this. I'm going to give you a quick story about another student of mine who wrote something that I was so amazed by when he finished. We played the brainstorming game. We tried to come up with ideas. I interviewed him. I asked him all sorts of questions, moments of adversity, moments where he'd experienced diversity, what he did over summers, what kind of travel. And honestly, we came up with a whole bunch of zeros. Every story that he tried to offer, you know what? It just didn't feel all that special. You know what he wound up writing in the essay? An incredibly ingenious spinning of the essay in the exact opposite direction that any admissions officer might have thought. He opened up with, I cannot wait to tell you the story of how I traveled to a third world country to be able to volunteer to help children in need. And then I realized that I don't have a passport. I can't wait to tell you the story of how I climbed Mount McKinley, the daunting challenge of scaling North America's tallest peak. And then, of course, I realized that I'm scared of heights. Every single one of his lines in his opening paragraph were here's the story that I know that you want to hear. I don't have that story. Because he was such a good writer, the one thing that he wanted them to realize is that he's a great writer. And in the end, he finished his essay with, I can't wait to tell you all of these stories after I graduate because of what you're going to empower me to do. What an awesome essay, and definitely not the one that anyone was expecting. So as we pull together multiple threads, keep in mind, be flexible. Being flexible here can lead to some really, really great ideas. Okay, beyond the personal statement, it's important for you to realize that there is something to think about beyond the personal statement itself. Because we're talking about making your application stand out, and we've talked about how to make your personal statement pop, one of the things that people forget is that it's not the only essay. I mentioned earlier in the hour that it is important to understand all of your essay requirements. If you're applying to University of Chicago, for instance, first of all, the University of Chicago has some of the most amazing essay questions I've ever seen. From a couple of years ago, I know one of them was, write a short story involving a one-way bus ticket and a piece of toast. What? Yeah, okay, that's what the University of Chicago does. There are some fantastic questions floating around. When we talk about understanding all the requirements and writing beyond the personal statement, remember, colleges that ask you questions beyond the personal statement are expecting serious answers. They're not expecting you to spend all of your effort on the personal statement, and then when they ask, why are you applying to Columbia, you just say something like, I like New York. That's not going to do it. You need to take the supplemental questions seriously. And actually, let me speak about one supplemental question in particular. The one I just mentioned, the why us question, the why Columbia, the why NYU, well, let's not be biased just into New York, why University of Texas at Austin, why Michigan, why Penn State, why Skidmore. Those questions exist, and most students write these in the wrong way. This why here sort of essay is normally written from the student's perspective as a love letter. I love your campus. I think your professors are awesome. I think that everyone is super nice. And honestly, I want to bleed orange and blue at Syracuse. Yeah, here's the thing. College admissions officers know why their college is awesome. They work there. If you're just regurgitating the brochure, if you're regurgitating the college tour, if you're regurgitating the website, you're actually not offering anything unique or valuable. It's important that you understand the supplemental essays are an opportunity for you to continue to get yourself out there, not simply to highlight that you bothered to read their webpage. So what can you do on the why here essay? I'll highlight that intellectual interests are the way to go. Remember, you're applying to college. If you're not telling them about how your interests in studying X are going to be met by going to University Y, you've done a poor job of selling yourself. It's essential that you take the time to explain what you want to study, why you want to study it, and how their programs are going to match up the best. It's important that you talk about the activities you were involved in, how the college has those same activities, and how you're going to bridge the gap from where you were to where you'd like to be. It's important that you talk about the volunteering that you used to do and how those activities still exist on the campus you're going to and how you're going to continue once you get there. Notice, by the way, that everything that I just said wasn't simply what the campus had, but what you already arrived bringing to that campus and how the two will meet. That's critical. What you're really doing in the supplemental essays is going out of your way to talk about anything that hasn't been in the personal statement that's still relevant. And because you have the opportunity to tell that story, you need to do it not just by highlighting what they have, but highlighting what you bring to the table. That is absolutely essential. If you don't spend your time highlighting all of the things that make you you, you're going to find yourself on the wrong end of that rejection letter. Now, when we talk about all of the requirements and we talk about these supplemental essays, I want to touch on something that I call presenting a complete picture. When I say presenting a complete picture, what I really mean is being able to tell each little part of you. We've talked about activities. We've talked about volunteering. Actually, let's pause on volunteering for 1 second. Some of you have required community service hours. If your community service is required, highlighting that you completed the requirement is not going to impress a college. That's like saying, I took 4 years of English. Yeah, they know you took 4 years of English. That was a requirement in high school. So don't tell them things like that. Say the requirement was 500 hours, but you know what? I found a program that I really loved, working with kids after school, teaching them math. And you know what? Even though it wasn't required, I spent another 300 hours at that school. And you know what I did on top of that? I brought that program to another school because I loved it so much. That's something that's important. Anyway, circling back to the presenting a complete picture. When I say presenting a complete picture, we talked about the activities, we talked about volunteering, we talked a bit about your intellectual interests. Sometimes what gets lost in the shuffle is the opportunity to just be a normal high school kid. Colleges are interested in the fact that you've done amazing things, but they're also interested in who you really are. So sometimes there are really powerful stories to tell in really, really small situations. I had a great essay from a student. She was asking me if this made sense. She was on a cruise, spring break, cruise, family. She had never been outside of the country before. She had actually really, I think, only traveled outside of her town a couple of times, maybe on a plane to Florida or to California, but really not traveling very much. She goes on this cruise and she had no understanding of the depth of poverty in some of the countries that the cruise ship docked at. When you think about it, first of all, it would seem that an intelligent and well-read individual would understand that Haiti is really not known for its economic success and in fact struggles mightily with poverty. Or that if you dock in Belize, while there might be great snorkeling for those who can afford it, the rest of the country isn't exactly living on gold and diamond houses. The fact that she didn't know it would seem to me to be a hole in her application, a vulnerability. But she turned it into actually a pretty marvelous moment of self-examination. She told the story of, I had no clue, and I was embarrassed for how little I knew. And so I came back, and I decided actually that my next presentation in school was going to be about what I saw as an opportunity to work in another country and help people improve their lives. She hadn't thought about starting a club until she started doing the research. She hadn't thought about trying to organize a fundraiser until she had been on the ship. When you think about it, as we talk about presenting the whole picture, we don't just mean the activities that make you you, but also the moments that you decide to go in that direction. Her story was all the more powerful because she was honest. She basically told the admissions officer, damn, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And in fact, I'm kind of embarrassed about it. But that wasn't the end of the story. The end of the story was, what can I do to fix it? That to me was a really powerful essay. So when I say presenting a complete picture, I don't just mean talking about your triumphs, and I don't just mean talking about how perfect you are, but I mean acknowledging that you're not perfect. That is a much better essay. I had a student in that same application class who wrote an essay that started off with something to the effect of, I'm the smartest kid in my school. Wow. You know, I gave him the advice that this was a terrible idea for an opening sentence for an essay, and he should never write it. By the way, he got rejected at about 4 of the top 6 schools that he applied to, most likely because they were like, wow, this guy's really arrogant. He could have presented a more complete picture that while he was intellectually pretty smart, there were moments of weakness that you could find in other places. He just didn't want to share those. You should feel like this is an opportunity to share a little bit of vulnerability. Admissions officers get that. I get that. Your parents get that. You're 16, you're 17, you're 15. Listen, the world is a really messed up place, and it's not so easy. Be honest. That will ring so much truer with an admissions officer than somebody who really tries to write the perfect essay for what they think somebody wants to hear. Okay. I just got a question, by the way, that was pretty funny. A student just sent in, is it really arrogant when you're telling the truth? If you are the smartest kid in the whole school, it may not come across in the right way for you to simply announce it in your opening sentence without offering some other context, because it comes across as arrogant when you only shout from the rooftops that you are the best at something. Because the truth is, none of you out there, myself included, is the best at everything. So even when you have something that you could be the best at, if that's not tempered with a bit of humility, if you can't look at yourself in the mirror and find some modesty towards something else, honestly, nobody wants you. Nobody wants you at their campus. I love the fact that Harvard points out that 2/3 of the kids with perfect scores got rejected, because I think it's important that we realize that perfect is really one of those things you can chase for your entire life without actually ever achieving anything of importance. One of the stories that they actually told to illustrate the point, they said that there was a student applying our year that had gotten a 1590. This was back when the SAT just had 2 sections. Got a 1590 out of 1600. And he retook the exam and got a 1590 again. Retook it a 3rd time and got a 1600. When you think about that, one lesson to draw is this kid really, really wanted the 10 points and wanted to work really, really hard because to him, his intellectual capability was wrapped up in a score and he wanted to be able to proclaim that he was perfect. To Harvard, they saw a kid that was bordering on psychotic. They rejected him. They saw a kid who didn't understand that the world was much bigger than just pursuing that perfect score. So while it may not be arrogant insofar as it could be true for you to say that you're the smartest kid in the school, it isn't the way to present it. Because there better be some part of you that has some humility, or definitely nobody wants you on the campus. That's a very good question, though. As we head into our final minutes, I want to put up one last slide that can actually just help you follow up after this. Part of what we want to do here is get the conversation started. But anybody who tells you that in 1 hour they can give you all of the secrets to writing the college essay is just a liar. I told you at the beginning that I was going to share my insights and that I was going to try and help you as much as I could. But I can't cram everything into a single hour, nor can you try and write an essay in the night before the applications are due. So it's important that this is really just the beginning. There are two websites that I want to point you to. One is called College Essay Organizer. It's collegeessayorganizer.com. This was a joint project with a friend of mine. And the goal here was to help students find all of their essay requirements so that you didn't have to go totally nuts looking on the supplements, looking on the Common App. By the way, don't even get me started on the Common App. What a disaster this past year. For those of you who are thinking the Common App is going to solve all your problems this year, do not count on it. But looking on the Common App, some schools use their own applications. For instance, Penn State and Wisconsin aren't even on the Common App. So we set up something that you can look up all of the schools and all of their essay requirements at the click of a button. You select all the schools you might want to apply to. It highlights all of the essay questions in one simple place. It is an instantaneous way to save you hours of work, and that's free. That account is really to try and get you started. There is something that we created that helps you tie together all of those essay questions so that you can write the fewest number of essays to satisfy the most essay requirements, so that once you finish the personal statement, you've got a clear path towards finishing the rest of the questions. That's something that we're providing a discount for College Week Live students that have watched this webinar. The promo code is CW50. That's 50% off. There is a roadmap that would make it $25. Expert access, that's a chance to talk to admissions people, independent consultants, financial aid experts. That would also be $25 instead of $50 or something to that effect, or a bundle that ties the two together. That program and that essay, college essay site really is meant to make your life easier. One of the things I would encourage you to do is sign up for the free account at the very least, so that you also know when the questions post to the actual applications. The Common App generally goes live around August 1st. There were some issues last year, but while that goes live August 1st, not every college posts all of their supplemental questions, and I pointed out before you might have a lot more to do than just the personal statement. So it's useful because we'll send you updates as the questions actually go live. You can begin work on your personal statement well in advance of the release of the applications. Why? Because as I said, it involves brainstorming, it involves selecting things that have threads you can tie together. It's a lot of different work that you can do even before the actual essay questions are published. So definitely get a head start now. Also want to point you to my website. That's alisteducation.com. As I said, it's a company that I founded in 2005, 2006. We've got about 100 staff. We can help you in a whole range of different ways. You could just look at our website for free information, all sorts of resources and helpful links and tips. You could also sign up for our blog or any of the other pieces of information that we provide for free. You can also reach out to us if you need more help than that. We're happy to find somebody to help you. And you can email us directly at info, that's INFO, at alisteducation.com. Now, there are one or two questions that are sitting here at the end. I'm just going to see if I've got time to grab these really quickly. It's a follow-up question from somebody else that had asked one earlier. This is a quick side note. This question is, it applies to many of you that might be looking at more competitive schools, where the question is almost an existential philosophical question. For example, where or when do you feel the most comfortable? That's something that we've seen in the past. That's not just a hypothetical. That's definitely something that has been asked before. The question came, can you start off with a philosophical dissertation to define comfortable? And through this, for example, find the place and time when you feel most comfortable. The answer is yes. When you take a look at these essay questions, it's important you realize that you can define the scope of the question for yourself. Sometimes students think to themselves, there's one right answer or one right way. That's not exactly true. Defining what comfortable means to you can actually lead you towards describing where you're the most comfortable. It might very well be that where you're most comfortable is thinking about being comfortable. You can approach these questions in non-traditional ways and come up with really exciting ways to answer things they weren't expecting. One of the questions that floats around on the internet as a bit of an urban legend was, how do you define courage? And supposedly the applicant wrote, this, period. And that was it. Now, it's a pretty bold way to risk your college application. And having gone to school at Harvard, they said it was Gertrude Stein. I had friends that went to Duke and Yale. They all heard the story at their colleges too. So who knows whether or not anybody really wrote that. But philosophically speaking, you want to answer the question as best you can to tell your story. And if that means bending it in some way to reestablish it in something that really tells a better version of who you are, definitely go for it. I've got one last question that I'm going to answer before we run out of time. When it comes to a UC or any other college, can there ever be a chance where when the college looks at your SAT or ACT scores, rejects you, but after reading your personal statement has a change of mind or something like that? The truth is, it's not exactly that ordering, but yes, you could be in the maybe or almost no pile. And readers will come across your essay and say, you know what, put this kid back into consideration. If you remember the statement I made before from Dean Fitzsimmons about a good essay can heal the sick, but it can't raise the dead. If your SAT scores and ACT scores are so low that they're way out of the range, your essay can't fix the problem. But remember, the ranges that are posted as the 25th to 75th percentile, representing the middle of the road, that's what colleges post. That means 25% of the campus scores below that range. The kids that are getting in below that range have something that sets them apart that makes them special. Maybe they're the best clarinet player in the world. Maybe they're the best lacrosse player in the world. Maybe it is that they've got amazing artistic ability, or maybe, just maybe, it was their personal statement. Now, I've had a lot of fun over the last hour. I hope you found what I said to be interesting and of use. I encourage you to take time when you have it to follow up and think about the essay and get started early. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, my name is Scott Farber. I'm the president and founder of A-List Education. Thanks for spending an hour with me, and have a great day.